Hey guys, tonight we're marching back nearly 1,000 years to the winter of 1097 on the long and deadly road to Antioch, one of the greatest cities in the medieval world. The First Crusade has already crossed Europe, Anatolia, and the plains of Asia Minor. You've trudged through mud, thirsted in deserts, and fought your way past Turkish ambushes. You're starving, filthy, half-crazed with exhaustion. And yet, at last, you see it. Rising from the Orontes river valley, ringed with mountains and crowned by towering stone walls, stands the prize. Antioch. The gateway to Syria and the key to Jerusalem. The year is 1097. And this army of faith, peasants, knights, nobles, monks and thieves alike, has marched farther than any Christian host in history. From France, from Normandy, from southern Italy, they came, following the call of Pope Urban II, who had promised forgiveness of sins to anyone who took up the cross, their dream to reach the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. But first they must take this city, an ancient fortress that guards the road to everything they've been fighting for. You trudge through the mud alongside them. The air smells of sweat, horses and smoke. Men mutter prayers under their breath. Behind you, wagons creak under dwindling supplies. Ahead, the orange glow of the city's towers burns through the mist. The sound of drums and horns drifts from beyond the walls. The Seljuk defenders already know you're coming. Antioch isn't just another city. Once part of Alexander's empire, then Rome's, then Byzantium's, it has seen more armies than you can count. In Roman times, 500,000 people lived here. Its colonnaded streets glowed with marble. It was called the Queen of the East. But now, under the Seljuks, it's a fortress bristling with spears, defended by tens of thousands under its governor, Yagisiyan. You hear rumours as you approach. The walls, people say, run 12 miles around the city, high as 30 metres with more than 400 towers. The Orontes River runs below, and the mountains guard its rear. It's not a city, it's a mountain of stone. And somewhere beyond those towers, the holy relics of early Christianity lie hidden. Saints' bones, apostles' churches. To take Antioch is to strike at the heart of history. The leaders of the Crusade, men like Bohemond of Tranto, Godfrey of Bouillon, Raymond of Toulouse, and Robert of Normandy, gather in council. They've been marching for months, living off Byzantine promises that never arrived. The emperor, Alexios Komnenos, had sworn to help, but his supply lines have vanished. The Crusaders are on their own now, stranded deep in hostile country. Bohemond, tall and cunning, studies the city's defences from a nearby hill. He's fought Turks before in the Balkans and Italy. He knows sieges, and he knows patience. We'll need both, he says grimly. The plan is simple in theory, impossible in practice. Starve the city before the city starves them. And so, the Great Ring begins. The Crusaders spread out, building makeshift camps around Antioch's walls. They cut trees for palisades, dig trenches, and send out foraging parties for food. The winter rains turn the roads into rivers of mud. Horses die by the hundreds. Men chew on boiled leather, weeds, and whatever they can steal. From the walls above, Yagisiyan watches them and laughs. He knows the odds. His granaries are full, his water secure, and his city's position nearly impregnable. Let them starve, he tells his captains. Allah will finish what hunger begins. At night, the Crusaders can see the city lights flickering beyond the walls. Warm, golden, taunting. The smell of baking bread drifts downwind, and men weep in silence. Every day brings new skirmishes, small, savage raids by Turkish cavalry who strike and vanish before the Franks can form a line. But the Crusaders keep marching the circle tighter, convinced that faith alone can hold them upright. Priests preach beside the campfires, waving crosses over the sick. Men mumble the Lord's Prayer through cracked lips. Women, following the army, gather wild herbs for broth. They all believe that God will deliver them, that this city will fall not to steel, but to divine will. Still, the days stretch into weeks, the weeks into months. The cold bites, the food vanishes, and the crusade that was supposed to save the Holy Land begins to look more like a death march, and yet somehow they stay. because to turn back now would mean admitting that heaven never called them in the first place. The first thing you notice about Antioch isn't its beauty, it's its size. Even from miles away, it dominates the horizon like a mountain built by human hands. The walls seem endless, wrapping around hills, plunging into valleys, rising again in jagged arcs. You could march for a day along its perimeter and still not see every tower. No wonder the men whisper that no city since Babylon has been built on such a scale. Antioch sits at a crossroads between worlds. To the west lies the Mediterranean, gateway to Byzantium and Europe. To the east, the open plains of Syria lead toward Aleppo, Mosul, and ultimately Jerusalem. Whoever controls this city controls the route between continents. The old Roman roads that once carried emperors and merchants now run beneath the hooves of soldiers. The city itself is layered like time. In the upper quarter, the citadel perches on Mount Silpius, a natural fortress so high that clouds brush its battlements. From there, the Seljuk governor, Yaghi can look down on the entire valley, on the river Orontes twisting below, on the Crusader camps spread like sores across the fields. The middle city is a maze of stone streets, mosques, churches and markets, and at the base, along the river, lies the Gate of the Bridge, the most vital artery guarded day and night. The Crusaders call the place the Iron City. The name fits. Even the gates have iron faces, studded, braced, and barred with beams thicker than a man's chest. You can see sunlight glint off their hinges in the morning, each one wide enough for 10 horses to ride abreast. Behind those gates wait thousands of defenders, Turks, Armenians, Arabs, and even some Christians who've chosen to side with Yaghi. The governor himself is no fool. Yaghi is an old man, shrewd and careful, more politician than warrior, but he understands the game of sieges. He's spent months preparing, stockpiling grain, fortifying weak points, even ordering the removal of food from villages nearby so the Crusaders will find nothing to eat. Inside, he enforces strict discipline. His captains patrol the streets, punish looters, and rally the citizens with promises of divine reward. "Hold the walls," he says. "Allah sees the faithful. From your camp below, you can hear their chants echoing down at dawn. The rhythmic cry of Allahu Akbar rolling like thunder from tower to tower. It sounds both defiant and distant, like the voice of the city itself. The Franks answer with their own prayers, Latin hymns rising from the valley, carried on the cold wind. Two faiths sing to the same sky, each convinced that heaven listens only to them. Every Crusader leader studies the walls differently. Bohemond of Taranto, ever the strategist, counts the towers and sketches rough maps. He points out where the slopes might allow scaling ladders, where the ground is too steep for siege engines. Raymond of Toulouse, older and more devout, walks among the starving men, offering bread from his dwindling supply. Godfrey of Bouillon, the quiet knight from Lorraine, prays more than he speaks. To him, Antioch is less a fortress than a test of faith. But faith doesn't fill stomachs. By mid-November, the Crusaders are already feeling the bite of hunger. Their foragers range farther each day, risking ambush. The countryside is stripped bare. Even the animals grow thin. Horses die faster than they can be buried. Some men eat roots and grass. Others boil their leather belts in river water. A few simply vanish into the hills. Still, the siege continues. At night, watchfires burn along both walls. Seljuk torches above, Crusader campfires below. The glow turns the sky red. You lie awake listening to the clash of patrols, the cries of wounded men, the occasional dull thump of a mangonel launching a stone. Sometimes the projectiles carry messages, mocking notes written in both Arabic and Latin. "Come climb if you dare," one reads. "We have bread." Inside the city, Yaghi strengthens his hold. He fears rebellion from the local Christians, mostly Armenians and Greeks, who secretly sympathize with the Crusaders. He orders some imprisoned, others exiled, and a few executed. The rest learn to keep their heads down and their loyalties hidden. The Crusaders, for their part, build siege lines, wooden towers, palisades, trenches, but they lack the manpower to encircle the entire city. There are always gaps, and through these Yaghi cavalry rides out to strike. Their attacks are swift and terrifying, Arrows from nowhere, horses pounding through mud, then silence. Each raid bleeds the Crusaders a little more, and yet, despite everything, despite hunger, rain, and death, they refuse to leave. The city before them isn't just stone, it's salvation. To abandon the siege would mean abandoning their vows, so they endure. Day after day they stare at those walls, fortress of stone, fortress of faith, and whisper the same question. If God truly willed this crusade, why does he make his city so hard to reach? From the towers of Antioch, Yaghi watches the Crusader camp sprawl across the muddy valley below like a plague that refuses to die. He's ruled the city for years, long enough to understand that patience often defeats courage. Every day that the Crusaders go hungry, every horse that collapses, every quarrel among their leaders, it all works in his favour. They will devour each other before they ever reach the walls, he says calmly to his son, Shams ad-Dawla, who commands the garrison alongside him. Inside the city, Yaghi rule is as cold as the winter rain. He's no romantic warrior. He's a governor who survives by paranoia. He knows Antioch's strength lies not only in stone but in control. And in this city, control means fear. He issues strict orders. No citizen may hoard food, no soldier may steal, and no one may speak to the enemy under pain of death. Scouts patrol the streets at night to catch spies. The walls are his pride. Nearly 400 towers, many still standing from Roman times, link the massive circuit that wraps around the mountain and down to the river. Each tower holds a garrison, archers, slingers, and guards from across the Muslim world, Turks, Persians, Arabs, Kurds, and local Armenians pressed into service. The citadel, perched high on Mount Silpius, looms like a crown over all of it. Whoever controls that fortress controls the entire city. But Yaghi also knows that walls alone don't win sieges. He keeps his cavalry sharp, leading small, brutal sorties out of the gates to harass Crusader foragers. His horsemen appear suddenly, loosing arrows, setting tents on fire, then vanish before the Franks can respond. Each raid is a reminder, Antioch is alive. Antioch bites back. He sends urgent messengers east to the great Seljuk lords, Dukak of Damascus, Ridwan of Aleppo, and Kerbogha of Mosul, warning them that the infidels have crossed the mountains and that Antioch stands as the last barrier to Syria. If Antioch falls, he writes, Jerusalem will follow. But the Muslim world, fractured by politics and pride, does not answer quickly. Each emir suspects the other of plotting for power. So Yaghi must hold the city alone, for now. Inside, life grows tense. Antioch is still a city of divided faiths. Muslims, Armenians, Greeks, Syriac Christians, all living uneasily under Seljuk rule. The Armenian and Greek communities keep their churches, but they're closely watched. Rumours of Crusader victories in the west stir dangerous hope. In the narrow streets near the bridge gate, you can hear whispers at night. The Franks will free us soon. Yaghi hears them too. He orders the arrest of prominent Christian families, confiscates their property, and expels others entirely. Hundreds are driven from the city, forced to seek refuge with the Crusaders outside. Some go willingly, bringing valuable intelligence about the city's layout and supplies. Among them are men who will later shape Antioch's fate. Men like Firuz, an Armenian guard whose grudge will one day open the gates. But that's still far ahead. For now, Yaghi confidence grows. He stages parades inside the walls, archers marching in glittering armour, horsemen performing mock charges, drums echoing off the towers. From below, the Crusaders watch, shivering in their thin cloaks as warm fires burn in the city above. In their camp, misery reigns. The winter of 1097 to 1098 is merciless. Cold rain floods the trenches, drowning supply wagons and soaking the tents. Bread turns to mould, meat rots before it can be eaten. Men cough blood and collapse from hunger. Horses gnaw on the bones of other horses. A few deserters stumble east, hoping to reach friendly Byzantine outposts. Others turn bandit, attacking villages for scraps. When they're caught, the Crusader leaders hang them as examples. Even noble knights can't escape despair. Bohemond paces his tent in fury. Godfrey kneels in prayer, and Raymond of Toulouse, the wealthiest of them all, sells his silver plate to feed his men. From the walls, Yagi-Sian watches and smiles. "They will break before spring," he mutters. He orders the musicians to play louder. But deep within the Crusader camp, something keeps them from disbanding, some mix of desperation and faith that defies reason. Priests lead processions around the city, holding relics aloft, chanting for divine intervention. The men follow barefoot through the mud, crosses carved into their tunics, eyes hollow but unyielding. Bohemond uses the time differently. He studies the city, every gate, every hill, every patrol. He's already thinking like a conqueror. "Antioch will fall," he says one night, "but not by hunger or siege engine. It will fall by sin, their sin or ours." Yagi-Sian, looking down from his citadel, believes the same thing, only with the names reversed. To him, the Franks are the sinners, arrogant invaders sent by a false god. He prays at dawn, confident that Allah will strike them down. 2 men, 2 faiths, and 1 city between them. The siege is no longer just a battle for walls, it's a duel of conviction, one that will grind on for months, until both sides are half mad from hunger and hate. And somewhere within those walls, the first cracks are already forming, not in stone, but in loyalty. By the start of 1098, the siege of Antioch has become a living nightmare. The Crusader army, which once marched across Anatolia like an unstoppable tide, is now little more than a ring of ragged men clutching splintered shields. The winter rains have turned the Orontes valley into a swamp. Armour rusts, tents rot, and the smell of death, horses, men, and things between, hangs in the air like incense from hell. Still, the army clings to its faith, and to its positions. The Crusader lines stretch thinly around the western and northern sides of the city, marked by a patchwork of wooden fortifications. They've built field castles out of mud and timber, half shelters, half defences. Each one has a name: the Bridgegate Fort, the Tower of Tancred, the Camp of Bohemond. But there are wide gaps, and through those gaps the defenders of Antioch strike again and again. Every few nights the Seljuk horsemen burst out from the gates, swift as shadows, shrieking their war cries. Their arrows darken the sky. They ride into the outer camps, burning wagons, killing men too weak to fight, then vanish before dawn. The Franks call these raids the Dances of Death. Everyone costs them more men, more morale, more hope. Hunger gnaws at everything. The grain they carried from Asia Minor is long gone. The supplies promised by Byzantium never arrive. In desperation, the Crusaders send foraging parties into the countryside. Many don't return. Turkish patrols hunt them down, some are found later, headless, their bodies left as warnings. The survivors begin to eat anything that moves: mules, rats, even leather straps boiled into a thin soup. Chronicles tell of men cutting flesh from the dead. "We devoured the bodies of Saracens," one knight confesses, "and sometimes the bodies of our own horses." Hunger erases shame. Inside the city, Yagi-Sian watches the misery below and grows confident. From the citadel walls, his soldiers hurl insults and animal carcasses at the Crusaders. "Go home, Franks," they shout. "Your god is weak." But his laughter hides anxiety. He's seen sieges before. He knows that hunger breeds not only weakness, but fanaticism. A starving army that still refuses to leave is not rational. It's dangerous. In the Crusader camp, faith becomes fuel. Priests lead barefoot processions around the walls, singing psalms, lifting relics toward the sky. The men march in silence, bones pressing against their skin, eyes hollow but burning. To anyone else, they'd look like the dead, but they believe they're soldiers of God, and the dead do not retreat. It's during this time that Bohemond of Taranto begins to rise above the others. He's pragmatic, cunning, and utterly unromantic. He knows that sieges aren't won by miracles alone. They're won by patience, by information, by treachery. When other leaders pray, Bohemond watches the city through a spyglass. He notes which towers have weaker guards, which gates open for supply runs, which sentries look distracted. He also starts to sow division among his allies. He tells them, "If the city falls, we must hold it ourselves. Do not think of Byzantium. Alexios has abandoned us. It's a quiet rebellion, planted like a seed. For now, the others don't argue. They're too busy trying not to die. In February, things somehow get worse. A plague sweeps through the camp. Dysentery, fever, perhaps typhus. The filth of months finally turns lethal. Men collapse mid-prayer, their lips blackened, their breath sour. There's no time to bury the dead. The ground is too hard. Corpses pile up outside the tents, frozen into grotesque shapes. Wolves and crows do the rest. Still, the Crusaders refuse to break. One reason is simple. Antioch represents everything. They've marched for a year across 2 continents to reach this point. To leave now would be to admit the crusade was a lie. Better to die before the walls of the Holy City's gate than to crawl home in shame. In March, a glimmer of hope appears. A fleet of Genoese and English ships arrives at the nearby port of St. Simeon, bringing food, weapons, and reinforcements. The men who survived the march from the coast stagger into camp carrying bread. For a few weeks, the Crusaders eat again. The mood shifts. Bohemond senses opportunity. He begins to rebuild morale through organisation. His troops repair palisades, dig deeper trenches, and set up wooden siege towers. He coordinates scouts to intercept supply trains entering Antioch. Gradually, the noose begins to tighten. Not perfectly, but enough to make Yagi Sian nervous. Inside the city, food stores start to shrink. Antioch has thousands of mouths to feed, and the governor begins to ration bread. His officers start blaming each other. There are rumours of secret negotiations, of guards tempted by gold or mercy. But Yagi Sian crushes dissent ruthlessly. Public executions in the squares, heads displayed at the gates, and still, the stalemate holds. By April, both sides are exhausted but unbroken. The Crusaders are learning siegecraft by trial and error. The defenders are learning fear. It's a frozen dance of endurance. One city, one army, and no middle ground. Each sunrise, the Franks wake to the same sight. Those enormous walls rising out of the mist, black and eternal. Each sunset, they fall asleep to the same sound. The muezzins calling to prayer, the drums rolling from the citadel, the mocking laughter from the towers. What they don't know, what no one yet suspects, is that a single man inside those walls is already thinking of betrayal, and Bohemond, waiting like a wolf in the dark, is about to find him. By early spring 1098, the siege of Antioch has become an open wound. The city's vast walls are as unbroken as ever, but both armies, inside and out, are rotting from hunger and disease. The Orontes valley has turned to mud. The air reeks of smoke and corpses, and even the ravens seem tired of feasting. Men dream not of victory, but of bread. The Crusaders' camps have shrunk to ragged islands of misery. Their horses are long dead. The oxen have been eaten. Even the leather from saddles and shoes is gone. Men dig through the dirt looking for beans spilled weeks before. Some, maddened by starvation, wander off into the hills muttering prayers. Others turn to robbery, or worse. Chroniclers, writing later with trembling hands, tell stories too grim for holy pages. Men stripping flesh from corpses, boiling bones into broth. One night, Radolf of Caen would write, "We ate the flesh of Saracens, roasted and boiled." He blamed hunger, not cruelty. But the truth is uglier. Starvation doesn't care about faith. Inside the city, Yagi Sian's people are not much better off. Though the governor had filled his granaries before the siege, months of isolation have drained them. The markets are empty. The smell of rot hangs over the bazaar. Bread costs its weight in silver. Horses are butchered, dogs disappear, and old men gnaw on boiled reeds. The citizens grumble in the alleys, wondering why relief has not come from Aleppo or Mosul. Yagi Sian keeps order through terror. Spies are everywhere. Anyone caught whispering of surrender is hanged from the walls as an example. The Armenians and Greeks, suspected of sympathy for the Crusaders, are watched closely. A single wrong word can mean exile or death. Meanwhile, the Crusaders' leaders try to hold the army together by sheer will. Bohemond, Raymond and Godfrey argue daily about strategy, rank, and ownership of the city that none of them can yet take. Stephen of Blois, the noble who married a king's daughter, quietly begins to despair. He writes home that the crusade is doomed and secretly plans to flee. Others, however, double down on faith. Every night, priests walk the lines with candles and crosses, urging the starving men to see their suffering as a holy test. God is watching, they say. The city will fall in his time. Some knights believe it, others stop listening. The camp's discipline begins to crack. Men gamble, steal, and fight each other. A knight kills his own comrade over a scrap of bread. Desertion becomes epidemic. The leaders respond brutally. They hang deserters at dawn, leaving their bodies swaying before the walls. The wind makes them creak like broken gates. And yet, even as hope flickers, something keeps the army alive. A kind of grim faith born of desperation. You can see it in their eyes. Every man knows that Antioch is not just another stronghold. It's the final barrier between them and Jerusalem. To leave now would mean God's promise was false. Better to die in the shadow of the city than to admit that. One man, above all, refuses to despair. Bohemond of Taranto. While others waste away, he studies. He walks the line of the siege daily, noting where the walls curve, where shadows fall, where guards change shift. He knows that siege engines and starvation won't win this fight. If Antioch falls, it will fall from within, and fortune, or fate, seems to agree. In April, the Crusaders intercept a letter carried by a spy, a message from Yagisiyan to the Emir of Mosul, begging for immediate reinforcements. "I cannot hold much longer," it reads. "The city is weary, the people complain. Send help before God's punishment finds us." The letter spreads through the camp like fire. The men take it as a sign. Even the mighty walls of Antioch are trembling. But Bohemond sees something else, an opening. He sends word through local Armenian traders that he's willing to reward anyone inside the city who can give him intelligence or a gate. Weeks later, a name reaches him, Firuz. Firuz is an Armenian convert to Islam, serving as an officer in charge of one of the citadel towers near the river. He's wealthy, embittered, and afraid. His brothers, still Christian, have been imprisoned by Yagisiyan. He's also greedy. Through a series of secret messengers, he begins to talk with Bohemond. They negotiate in whispers and coded gestures, trading promises of gold and safety. Firuz wants freedom for his family. Bohemond wants the city. Each sees the other as a means to survive. But Bohemond keeps the secret close. Not even his fellow Crusader lords know. He fears they'll ruin everything with their pride, or worse, claim the city for Byzantium once it falls. So he plays his hand carefully, pretending patience while quietly preparing for betrayal. In the meantime, the Crusaders endure. They dig deeper trenches, build more watchfires, and keep praying for a miracle, or for the enemy to break. The skies turn from grey to gold as spring arrives, but the famine doesn't ease. The air smells of wildflowers and decay. Every day the men look at those walls and wonder if they'll ever see beyond them, and Bohemond, ever the predator, smiles. He knows that walls don't fall, they're opened, and when the time comes it won't be by siege or starvation or miracle, it will be by treachery, the oldest weapon in war. The spring sun rises over the Orontes valley, warm and merciless. By now the Crusader camp has turned from an army into a graveyard with banners. The survivors drag themselves through the days, bones showing beneath sunburned skin, armour held together by hope and rust. They whisper about rescue, about food, about God, mostly about God. But the only thing that answers is the wind, and somewhere in Constantinople that wind carries news that should have changed everything. Months earlier, Emperor Alexios Komnenos, the man whose call for aid had set this crusade in motion, had promised to send Byzantine troops and supplies to help them take Antioch. In return, the Crusader leaders had sworn oaths to restore any captured cities to him. It was supposed to be an alliance of faith and politics, but now, with the Crusaders starving and Antioch still standing, Alexios hesitates. Word reaches him through Stephen of Blois, the despairing noble who slipped away from the siege. Stephen arrives in Byzantine territory half dead, babbling that the crusade is lost, that Antioch is surrounded, that the Franks will be annihilated before the summer. to Alexios. It sounds like a warning. The emperor, cautious by nature, believes him. To march east now, he tells his generals, would be to march into death. And so, while the Crusaders bleed beneath Antioch's walls, their supposed ally turns back. His armies retreat toward Asia Minor, leaving the Franks alone. In the Crusader camp, the news hits like a hammer. When deserters and scouts confirm that the Byzantines are not coming, the outrage spreads faster than plague. "The Greeks have betrayed us," Bohemond thunders to his men. "They promised us aid and sent us lies." To the starving army, it's not just politics, it's heresy. The Byzantines were supposed to be fellow Christians, the bridge between East and West. Now, in the Crusaders' eyes, they're worse than the Turks. The bitterness becomes faith's twisted twin. Priests thunder that God has rejected Byzantium for its cowardice, that the Franks are the true chosen people now. Bohemond, ever the opportunist, fans the fire. "If the emperor will not take this city," he declares, "then God has given it to us." It's more than rhetoric. It's a claim, a seed of independence that will bloom into the First Crusader state. Inside the city, Yaghi-Sian has no idea that his enemy's unity is cracking. He sees only the surface. Men dying, camps shrinking, knights too weak to lift their swords. He believes victory is close. Still, he's nervous. His own spies bring word that the Crusaders' allies from the sea are landing more supplies at St. Simeon. His son, Shams-ad-Dawla, urges him to strike now while the Franks are weakest. Yaghi-Sian hesitates. He's waiting for reinforcements from Kerbogha of Mosul, the most powerful of the Seljuk warlords. But Kerbogha moves slowly, gathering an army of tens of thousands from Mosul, Aleppo and Damascus. Every day he delays, the pressure inside Antioch builds. Bohemond senses that too. He redoubles his secret dealings with Firuz, the Armenian tower guard. Firuz is growing restless. His position in the city is slipping, his fear of discovery mounting. Yaghi-Sian's men have begun arresting suspected traitors. One mistake, and Firuz will swing from the walls. Their messages now pass hidden in bundles of firewood, through merchants or women selling herbs near the river. Bohemond's instructions are simple. When the moon is dark and the watch is weary, open your gate. God will forgive you. But Bohemond doesn't tell his fellow leaders about Firuz, not yet. He plays the long game, feeding them half-truths about a weakness in the city to keep their hope alive while he secures his prize. The hunger worsens. Men chew on reeds, drink foul water, and die in their sleep. A priest writes, "Our bodies were as shadows, our bones visible beneath our skin. Yet somehow they still march to prayer each morning. Faith has become defiance, the last weapon left." Then, in late May, a rumour ripples through the camp. Kerbogha's army is coming, tens of thousands, maybe more, marching from the east. The words spread panic. Some weep. Some start packing their few belongings. Others drop to their knees in prayer. Bohemond sees opportunity again. He gathers the leaders in council and lays his trap. "If we hold this siege, we'll be crushed between Antioch and Kerbogha," he warns. "But if we take the city before his arrival, we'll have its walls to defend. I have a way, God's way, to open the gates, but I will only reveal it if you grant me one thing, the city itself when it falls." There's outrage, of course. Raymond of Toulouse accuses him of greed. Godfrey calls it blasphemy. But the others, starving, hopeless, desperate, see no alternative. Bohemond gets his wish. Now the game is set. Yaghi-Sian, high in his citadel, believes his enemies are collapsing. Bohemond in his tent below knows the city is already his, and beyond the horizon, the dust of Kerbogha's army is rising like a storm. The walls of Antioch will soon witness what no city should, a siege turned inside out. The end of May 1098. The valley of the Orontes is a cauldron about to boil over. The city of Antioch still stands proud behind its walls, but the world around it has begun to unravel. Inside, the garrison prays for reinforcements. Outside, the Crusaders stagger through the heat, half dead, half divine, and somewhere between them a storm is moving west. Kerbogha's army, tens of thousands strong, the vengeance of Islam. For 7 months the Crusaders have been the besiegers. In a few days they'll become the besieged. At first there's only rumour, Armenian scouts report columns of dust rising far beyond the Euphrates. Turkish horsemen are said to have been sighted near Aleppo. Then, one morning, the truth arrives in the shape of terrified peasants fleeing westward. They've seen it. A moving forest of spears, banners the size of sails, drums that make the air shake. Kerbogha is coming, and he's bringing every emir who still dreams of driving the Franks into the sea. The news spreads through the Crusader camp like fire. Some men fall to their knees, weeping. Others throw down their arms and flee toward the coast. Stephen of Blois, already half broken by fear, rides away under cover of night, vowing to warn the others. The rest stay because there's nowhere left to go. They've burned every bridge, eaten every horse, defied every logic of survival. They've got one hope left, the city in front of them. Bohemond, meanwhile, moves with eerie calm. He's been waiting for this moment. Kerbogha's approach gives him the urgency he needs to act on his secret plan. The army doesn't know it, but he's been in contact with Firuz, the Armenian guard who holds one of the towers on Antioch's north wall. Firuz's letters are desperate now. He fears discovery, and he demands Bohemond fulfill his promise of gold and protection. "Come soon," he writes. "If God wills, I will open the gate." Bohemond knows time is running out. He gathers the Crusader princes in council, Godfrey, Raymond, Robert of Normandy and the others, and speaks plainly. "Kerbogha will be here in days. When he arrives, we will be trapped between two enemies. But I have a man inside the city. He will open a gate. If you will support me, I will lead the assault at first," they argue. Raymond still calls Bohemond a liar, saying, "You hunger more for crowns than for crosses." But even he can feel the noose tightening. When scouts confirm that Kerbogha's vanguard is only days away, the council yields. Bohemond will lead the attack. The date is set for the night of June 2nd. The day before, the Crusaders prepare in grim silence. Priests bless the weapons, sprinkling rusted swords with holy water. Men sew crosses to their sleeves, confess their sins, and pray not to die hungry. A faint wind blows from the east, carrying the smell of summer grass and, faintly, of smoke. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Kerbogha's army is burning villages. Inside Antioch, Yagisian feels that same wind and mistakes it for luck. From his walls he sees the Crusaders quiet, their camp strangely subdued. They have lost their will, he tells his captains. Tomorrow they will flee. He's half right. At midnight the moon slips behind clouds, and the Crusader camp comes alive. Shadows move among the tents, gathering at the foot of the northern wall. They are fewer than 10,000 now, the survivors of a year-long pilgrimage through hell. Each man carries a rope, a dagger, or a prayer. Their armour creaks softly. Their eyes gleam like glass. At the base of the wall, a narrow ladder rises into the dark. Above it, a small flicker of light. The signal. Firuz is waiting. For months he's played a dangerous game, bribed his fellow guards, silenced questions, and hidden his fear. Tonight everything ends. His reasons are simple: money, revenge, survival. But they'll echo for centuries. The first Crusaders climb in silence. A handful scale the ladder, cling to the battlements, and pull themselves over. Firuz greets them wordlessly, guiding them to the gate tower. Below, more men ascend, one after another, until the wall itself seems to crawl with ghosts. When the inner bolts finally give way, the great bridge gate opens with a groan that seems to wake the entire city. Trumpets sound, shouts rise, and the Crusaders pour in like a flood. The defenders, caught between disbelief and panic, rush to the walls. Arrows rain down from both sides, Muslims firing from towers, Crusaders shooting upward from the streets. Fires erupt, doors splinter. Somewhere near the citadel, a church bell begins to ring wildly, as if the stones themselves are crying out. Yagisian wakes to chaos. He runs to the balcony of his palace and sees the impossible. His own walls crawling with Franks, their banners already fluttering inside the city. He screams for his guards, for his son, for Allah. But the order is gone. The night has turned into a storm of steel and screams. The massacre has begun. The night of June 2nd, 1098, collapses into madness. Antioch, city of emperors, saints and merchants, awakens not to the dawn but to the thunder of boots, fire and steel. The gate opened by Firuz is a wound through which the Crusaders pour like blood. The invaders rush into the sleeping city shouting, "Deus vult! God wills it!" The same cry that had carried them across half the world. The assault is chaos wrapped in prayer. Bohemond of Taranto, armoured and pale, leads the first wave through the Gate of St. George. His sword flashes in the torchlight as his men swarm over the battlements. Behind him come the Normans, the Provençals, the Lotharingians, knights and peasants alike stumbling over one another in the dark, killing everything that moves. Inside the city, the alarm spreads too late. Yagi Sian's sentries cry warnings in Arabic and Persian, but the sound is lost in the roar. The Crusaders strike from street to street, kicking in doors, cutting down guards as they stumble from sleep. Fires break out everywhere. Oil lamps spill. Thatched roofs burst into flame. The night becomes a single red glare. In the lower quarters by the river, the people run. Women clutch children. Old men shout prayers. Soldiers shout orders that no one hears. The narrow alleys turn into traps. Fleeing civilians collide with Crusaders charging forward. The air smells of smoke, sweat, and terror. Bohemond's men head for the bridge gate, determined to open it for the rest of the army. The defenders there fight like cornered beasts, Turkish archers firing from rooftops, Armenian auxiliaries turning on their commanders, trying to save their families. Firuz himself, trembling on his tower, watches the city burn and knows there's no turning back. He's betrayed one master for another, and neither will forgive him. By dawn, the Crusaders hold half the city. The carnage is unspeakable. Chroniclers later write that blood ran ankle-deep in the streets, and for once the exaggeration feels small. Knights who can barely stand from hunger now glut themselves on vengeance. The first rays of sunlight fall on piles of corpses, soldiers, merchants, women, children, all cut down in the frenzy. Yagi Sian, realizing the battle is lost, flees. He mounts a horse with a handful of guards and slips out through a postern gate toward the mountains. Behind him, his son Shams ad-Dawla fights a desperate rearguard action near the citadel, buying time for the survivors to flee. The fight is hopeless. The Crusaders, half mad with exhaustion and triumph, swarm up the hill and butcher everything in their path. Somewhere in the chaos, Yagi Sian's flight ends as miserably as his rule. He's thrown from his horse, captured by Syrian peasants who once served him, and beheaded. His head, wrapped in linen, is carried back to the city and paraded through the streets like a grim trophy. Inside the walls, the slaughter continues for hours. Bohemond orders his men to spare no one who resists. The few who do surrender, Armenian Christians, some Greek Orthodox families, are dragged from hiding and questioned to prove their faith. Those who can recite Latin prayers are spared. Those who cannot die. It's not righteousness, it's exhaustion in the shape of zeal. By noon, Antioch is silent. The city that had defied them for 8 months lies conquered. Flames rise from the markets, and the sound of weeping fills the air. Knights stumble through the ruins, too weak even to loot. Some fall to their knees, thanking God. Others collapse where they stand, asleep among the dead. Bohemond, his armour black with soot, surveys the devastation from the roof of the governor's palace. Below him, the Orontes glimmers through the smoke. The city is his, by right of conquest and by the bargain he struck before the assault. He sends heralds to proclaim the victory, his voice hoarse but triumphant. By the will of God and the valour of the Franks, Antioch is ours. But even as his men cheer, a scout rushes into the hall breathless. Kerbogha's vanguard has reached the plain. Tens of thousands of enemy soldiers, fresh, fed and furious, are setting up camp beyond the river. The siege that the Crusaders believed was over has just reversed itself. Bohemond stares out over the walls. The city still smoulders, its wells choked with ash and blood, its streets clogged with bodies. His army, barely alive, now has to hold these walls against a force larger than any they've ever faced. There's no time for rest, no food, no strength, but there's also no retreat. Behind them, nothing but desert and despair. Before them, the might of Mosul. The Crusaders have taken Antioch. Now they have to survive it. Dawn breaks over Antioch on June 4th, 1098, but there is no celebration. The fires from the night's slaughter still smoulder, sending grey smoke twisting into the pale sky. The city smells of blood and burnt wood. Everywhere you look, the streets are littered with corpses, Franks and Muslims alike tangled together in death. The Crusaders have won the city, yes, but they've inherited a ruin, and now they find themselves trapped inside it. From the towers, the sentries can see the dust clouds already gathering to the east. It's not a storm, it's Kerbogha's army, tens of thousands strong, rolling toward them like a tide of iron. What was once a siege has turned inside out. Bohemond, barely rested, calls the princes to council in the governor's palace. They gather around him, Raymond of Toulouse wounded and grim, Godfrey of Bouillon pale from fever, Robert of Normandy gaunt as a ghost. There's no food, no horses, no time. The men are sick and starving. The few can still fight are half mad from exhaustion. Kerbogha will be here within a day, says Bohemond. If we don't hold the walls, we die. Raymond's temper snaps. We've taken the city for you, he snarls. Now you would turn us into prisoners within it? Bohemond slams his fist on the table. Better prisoners than corpses in the open field. The argument rages, but it doesn't matter. Outside the walls, the drums of Mosul are already beating. Kerbogha's army arrives that afternoon, a sea of banners stretching to the horizon. Turks, Persians, Arabs, and Kurds, all united under his black standard. Chroniclers later claim there were 75,000 men. Maybe it was less, maybe more. What mattered was the sight. Cavalry stretching farther than the eye could see, siege engines creaking in the heat, the glitter of sunlight on 1,000 blades. Inside the city, despair sets in. The Crusaders who survived the assault are too weak to stand. Many can't even lift their weapons. The dead from the night before still lie unburied, spreading disease. The smell is unbearable. Flies fill the air like smoke. When Kerbogha's army surrounds the walls, the Crusaders realize the truth. They're no longer conquerors. They're prey. The Muslims waste no time. Within hours, catapults and mangonels are hammering the walls. Arrows rain down on the ramparts. Fires break out in the lower quarters. The Crusaders scramble to respond, but there's almost no coordination. Their commanders are exhausted, their ranks thinned by hunger. The same walls that had once imprisoned the defenders now trap their conquerors. Kerbogha's men cut off every route to the outside world. The port at St. Simeon, their only supply line, is seized. No food, no reinforcements, no escape. The Crusaders are encircled, starving once more, this time with their backs against the city they'd bled to take. Panic spreads like disease. Some men whisper that God has abandoned them, that the fall of Antioch was a trap laid by Satan. Others believe it's punishment for their sins, the looting, the killing, the bloodshed of innocents. Priests lead processions through the streets, begging heaven for mercy, carrying crosses blackened with soot. Bohemond orders every able-bodied man to the walls. The sick and wounded are left in the churches to die quietly. They line the towers, knocking arrows, waiting for the enemy's next move. Then the first sorties begin. Kerbogha's horsemen test the defences, riding close enough to taunt the Franks, then darting away before the arrows find them. They set fire to the outer gates. They launch severed heads into the city. At night they light torches across the plain, thousands of flames flickering in the dark, a field of stars meant to break the defenders' spirits. It works. Men start talking about surrender. Some slip away through broken sections of the wall trying to desert. One night, Peter the Hermit, the same preacher who helped start the Crusade, tries to flee but is caught and dragged back in disgrace. Bohemond, desperate to keep order, turns to faith as the last weapon left. If we perish, he tells his soldiers, we perish as saints. If we live by God's hand. But even as he speaks, the situation worsens. Food runs out completely. The Crusaders begin eating horse bones, leather, grass. Some boil old belts for broth. In the ruins of Antioch they find the bodies of Turks killed days before and burn them for fear of plague. The sky itself seems to darken with despair. And then, just when hope seems impossible, a strange rumour spreads through the ranks. A peasant named Peter Bartholomew, a common soldier from Provence, claims to have had a vision. He says that St. Andrew appeared to him in a dream and revealed that the Holy Lance, the spear that pierced Christ's side, lies buried beneath the floor of the Cathedral of St. Peter inside the city. At first, no one believes him. Another delusion, another desperate man grasping for meaning. But in a city starving to death, even a delusion can be salvation. Bohemond sees the potential instantly. A relic, a miracle, a sign from heaven. Anything to bind this shattered army together again. He gives the order to dig. The Cathedral of St. Peter in Antioch is little more than a ruin, a hollow shell left standing from Byzantine times. Its mosaics are cracked, its altar blackened from the fires that swept the city days earlier. But on June 14th, 1098, the place is crowded. Hundreds of starving men pack the nave, silent except for the sound of shovels striking stone. They're digging for salvation. At the centre of the chaos stands Peter Bartholomew, the peasant from Provence whose vision has turned despair into frenzy. He's barefoot, wrapped in a tattered cloak, his face pale with exhaustion and fever. He swears that the Holy Lance, the spear that pierced Christ's side on the cross, lies buried beneath the church floor. The Crusader leaders watch from the shadows. Bohemond doesn't believe, not really, but he knows belief itself can be a weapon. "Let them dig," he murmurs to Raymond of Toulouse. "Better they dig than despair." The digging lasts for hours. Men tear up the stone floor, hurling aside chunks of marble. Sweat pours from their faces. The air grows thick and stifling. Priests chant Latin prayers, their voices echoing off the broken arches. The sun sets, and still they dig. By midnight, most of them have given up. The hole is deep enough to swallow a man. The crowd begins to drift away, muttering. "A false vision," someone says. "Another lie." Even the priest falls silent. Then, suddenly, Peter Bartholomew shouts. He leaps into the pit and cries, "Here!" Here it is. He holds up a long iron spearhead, black with rust. Gasps fill the cathedral. Some men fall to their knees, others weep openly. Whether it's truly the Holy Lance or just an old Byzantine relic doesn't matter. In that moment, it's a miracle. The relic passes from hand to trembling hand. Priests kiss it. Soldiers press their foreheads against the metal. Even hardened knights begin to believe that heaven has chosen them anew. And just like that, the hopeless siege becomes a holy war again. Word spreads through the city like fire. The Holy Lance has been found. God has not abandoned them. By morning, the entire army knows. Men who were too weak to stand are now crawling toward the cathedral to see it. Some claim the air itself smells of roses. Bohemond, ever the tactician, seizes the moment. He has the lance carried in procession through the streets. Trumpets sound, priests sing hymns, banners wave again from the towers. The enemy outside can hear the noise and wonders what has changed. Inside, every starving crusader feels it, the return of purpose, of destiny. The next day, Bohemond gathers the princes and announces his plan. Kerbogha thinks us broken. Let us prove him wrong. Tomorrow we march out and meet him in open battle. Raymond of Toulouse hesitates. March out? We can barely walk. Bohemond raises the lance. We don't walk, he says. We follow. It's madness, and yet the kind of madness that wins wars. That night the Crusaders prepare like men reborn. They polish rusted armour, bind their wounds, and pray. Priests move through the camps offering absolution. Some confess their sins through tears, convinced they'll die at dawn. Others simply stare into the darkness, whispering, "God wills it." In the Turkish camp beyond the walls, Kerbogha watches the flicker of torches from the city and laughs. "Let them come," he says. "They are ghosts already." He has reason to be confident. His army dwarfs theirs. His men are rested and fed. The Crusaders, by contrast, are gaunt and hollow-eyed, little more than skeletons with swords. No one in history would have called it a fair fight. But faith isn't fair. At dawn on June 28th, the gates of Antioch open. The Crusaders march out in formation, banners of the cross snapping in the wind. Bohemond leads the vanguard, the Holy Lance raised before him. Behind him come Godfrey, Raymond, Robert, and the remnants of their armies. Barely 20,000 men, many too weak to mount their horses, they march singing hymns. The sound carries across the plain, eerie and defiant. Kerbogha watches from his command tent, stunned at their audacity. They come to their death, he says. He orders his archers to advance. The first volleys darken the sky. Arrows whistle down. Men fall, but the Crusaders keep moving. Bohemond raises the lance and shouts, "This day God fights with us!" And somehow the lines hold. Kerbogha's army, vast but fractured, begins to falter. His emirs distrust him. Their men fight half-heartedly. The Crusaders, burning with desperation and faith, crash into them like a tide. Knights who hadn't eaten in days swing swords with supernatural fury. Archers shoot until their fingers bleed. Witnesses later swear that angelic riders appeared in the sky above the Franks, phantoms of saints, banners of light. Maybe it was dust, or heat, or mass hysteria. But belief is a weapon sharper than steel. By noon, the unthinkable happens. Kerbogha's lines break. First one wing, then another. Panic spreads. His vast army dissolves into chaos. Horsemen trampling foot soldiers, banners falling. The Franks chase them down, cutting through ranks of men 10 times their number. By sunset, the plain of Antioch is littered with the dead, and the survivors of the First Crusade stand victorious. Against hunger, against reason, against every law of war, they've broken the might of Mosul. Back inside the city, bells ring. Men embrace and weep. The Holy Lance rests on the altar again, gleaming faintly in the torchlight. The Crusaders believe, truly believe, that heaven has fought beside them. But Bohemond knows better. Faith may have saved them, but cunning will keep them alive. Antioch is his now, by right of battle, by right of oath, and by right of sheer survival. And somewhere far to the south, in Jerusalem, the next chapter waits. The day after the battle, the plains of Antioch lie still under the summer sun. The smoke has cleared, but the land is covered with the dead. Horses, men, banners, and broken spears tangled in the dust. Carrion birds circle overhead. The air stinks of iron and sweat. For the Crusaders, victory feels unreal, like a fever dream from which they might wake at any moment. They had marched out to die, and instead they've killed an army 3 times their size. In the streets of Antioch, the survivors stagger back through the gates, bleeding and trembling. Some laugh, others weep, a few drop dead before they can even reach the churches. The priests ring bells and shout, "Deus vult!" while monks carry the wounded on stretchers made of doors. The relic, the Holy Lance, is carried at the head of a procession through the city. Wherever it passes, men drop to their knees. They touch it, kiss it, cry over it. To them, this is not merely proof of victory, it's proof that God himself has chosen them. But Bohemond walks behind the procession in silence. He's alive, yes, but he knows better than to mistake luck for miracle. He saw what really won the battle. Not angels, not relics, but unity born of desperation. Faith gave them courage, strategy gave them the killing edge, and now strategy will decide what happens next. The Crusaders, after all, have nothing left. The battle is over, but famine remains. Their ranks are thinned to a fraction of what they were. Their supply lines are gone. Half the city still lies in ruin, the rest filled with corpses. Disease follows victory like a shadow. And there's another problem. Ownership. Bohemond gathers the princes in council. They meet in the old palace that once belonged to Yagi Sian. The walls are cracked and blackened, but the hall still reeks of power. Raymond of Toulouse, wrapped in bandages, sits glaring across the table. Godfrey of Bouillon stands quietly by the window staring at the hills. Bohemond speaks first. "The city is ours," he says simply. "We took it by sword, not by oath." "It belongs to the one who led its capture," Raymond snaps. "You mean it belongs to you?" "I mean," Bohemond replies evenly, "that it belongs to the Crusade, and I will hold it until the will of God, or the will of the Pope, says otherwise." Everyone knows what that means. The oaths they swore to Emperor Alexios, to return any conquered city to Byzantium, are dust now. Alexios turned back when they needed him most. The Franks are done fighting for Greeks. Raymond protests, invoking duty, faith, and honour. But his voice grows thin. Even his own men, starving in the streets, see the sense in Bohemond's claim. Without his leadership, they would all be dead. Without his deal with Firouz, the city would still be in enemy hands, and so, by exhaustion rather than agreement, Antioch becomes Bohemond's. The First Crusader principality is born, not a kingdom of faith, but a frontier of pragmatism. Outside the council chamber, the common soldiers care little for politics. They loot what's left of the markets, digging through burned stalls for grain or trinkets. The Armenians and Greeks who survived the siege cautiously reopen their shops, trading food for protection. The smell of rot fades, replaced by the smoke of cooking fires. Slowly, the city begins to breathe again. But peace is uneasy. Every night new graves are dug. Disease takes more lives than the Turks ever did. Some nights desert, heading north towards Cilicia to find food. Others talk of Jerusalem, still far to the south. Then there's Peter Bartholomew, the peasant prophet. His fame soars after the victory. Men call him the mouth of God. But Bohemond distrusts him. He sees too much, he tells Raymond privately. Visions are dangerous when they outlive their purpose. In truth, the holy lance that united them is already dividing them. Some claim it's real, others whisper it's a fraud. The priests fight over who should keep it. Peter swears more visions are coming, and some believe him, but others start to question his sanity. The same relic that gave them courage now fuels suspicion. Meanwhile, word of the Crusaders' victory races across the east. In Aleppo, in Damascus, in Mosul, men speak Bohemond's name with anger and awe. For the first time, the Muslim world realizes that these foreigners are more than pilgrims. They are conquerors, and they will not stop at Antioch. Bohemond, standing on the citadel one evening, watches the sunset burn across the valley. He knows what lies ahead. Taking the city was only the beginning. Holding it will take cunning. Reaching Jerusalem will take miracles of another kind. Below him, the Orontes glimmers red in the fading light, red like the blood that bought his new domain. Antioch stands half ruined, half resurrected, a monument to faith, greed, and survival. The Crusaders call it God's victory. Bohemond knows it's man's, and beyond the horizon, Jerusalem waits, silent and shining, the final promise still unfulfilled. Summer settles over Antioch like a fever. The smoke from burned houses drifts lazily in the heat, mingling with the stench of rot that still clings to the city's walls. The Crusaders, too weak to bury all the dead, have dragged bodies into heaps outside the gates, where the flies hum so thickly it sounds like chanting. What had begun as a triumph now feels like a slow, drawn-out punishment. The men who fought like angels against Kerbogha's host now lie pale and hollow-eyed in the streets. Disease has followed famine, creeping through the ruins like a second siege. The same men who once called themselves soldiers of God now barter for scraps of bread, strip the corpses of their comrades and steal from the churches. Bohemond, newly styled Prince of Antioch, walks among them like a ghost of his own victory. He rules a city without food, money, or hope. But still, a city. It's enough. For now. He sets about turning the wreckage into order. The first task is defence. He repairs the gates and towers, posts sentries along the walls, and orders scouts into the countryside to watch for counterattacks. He knows the Muslim world will not let Antioch go easily. The second task is politics, to hold together an army that no longer wants to be here. He summons the surviving lords, Raymond of Toulouse, still weak but restless, Godfrey of Bouillon, the quiet and pious knight, Robert of Normandy and Tancred, his nephew, fierce and loyal. They gather again in the old palace, this time not as allies but as rivals forced into truce. Raymond speaks first. "We've done what we came for. Antioch is ours. Now we must march to Jerusalem before the year ends. The Holy Sepulchre awaits." Bohemond leans back, expression unreadable. "You may march if you wish. I will not. The city must be held." Raymond's eyes flash. "You swore this crusade was for God, not for your own crown." Bohemond smiles faintly. "And yet, without my crown, none of you would have lived to see it. It's not arrogance, it's truth. Everyone in that room knows it. He saved them at Antioch. He led the assault, the defence and the counterattack. His men trust him more than any other, but his ambition poisons everything it touches. Outside, rumours spread like plague. Some say Bohemond has struck a deal with the Byzantines, others that he means to build his own kingdom in the east. The priests whisper that God has turned his face from the Franks because of greed. Meanwhile, the common soldiers are dying. Food is almost gone again. The summer heat spoils what little they have. The river water stinks. Men dig for roots in the gardens, raid old tombs for valuables, anything to survive. The Armenian and Greek citizens, the few who remain, hide their supplies and pray for mercy. In the cathedral, the relic of the Holy Lance still rests on the altar. Pilgrims file past it day and night, touching the spearhead, begging for healing. But not everyone believes anymore. The same relic that united them now divides them. Peter Bartholomew, the peasant visionary who found it, has become a lightning rod. Some worship him as a saint, others call him a fraud. When the sick continue to die, even after touching the relic, whispers grow louder. If the lance is holy, someone mutters, why does God not spare us? The church leaders try to silence the doubts, but the damage is done. The lance has turned from symbol to burden. By August, Raymond can no longer stand it. He announces his intention to leave Antioch and march south to Jerusalem. We have lingered too long in this city of death, he declares. A few hundred knights follow him. Bohemond watches them go, smiling thinly. Let them chase ghosts, he says. But Raymond's departure splits the crusade. Without unity, the dream of the Holy Land starts to fracture into smaller, hungrier ambitions. Each prince imagines his own principality, his own crown. In the months that follow, Antioch begins to recover, if only slightly. Caravans from Cilicia bring grain and wine. The Armenians reopen the markets. The city's churches are rededicated in Latin rites. Slowly, life creeps back into the ruins. Bohemond strengthens his hold, fortifying the citadel and minting new coins bearing his name, Bohemundus Princeps, the first Crusader prince, the man who turned a pilgrimage into a kingdom. At night, though, he dreams of the siege, the endless hunger, the cold, the screams in the dark. He sees Firuz's trembling hands unlocking the gate, the fires that followed, the faces of the dying. Antioch was his triumph, yes, but also his curse. He knows it can never truly be his. For the rest of Europe, news of the victory arrives months later, carried by messengers and monks. The West celebrates as if the Holy Sepulchre itself has been freed. Songs are written. Churches ring bells. They don't see the rot still festering beneath the glory. To them, Antioch is a miracle. To those who lived it, it's a scar. By the year's end, the crusade has split in two, those who stay with Bohemond and those who follow Raymond toward Jerusalem. The city they fought to the edge of madness for has become a crossroads between faith and ambition. And far to the south, the walls of Jerusalem shimmer in the desert heat, waiting for the next army of the cross. The First Crusade marches on. But the siege of Antioch, its horror, its miracles, its hunger, its pride, will never be forgotten. For in that ruined city by the Orontes, faith learned to wear a crown. Autumn comes to Antioch quietly. A thin veil of gold dust over the bones of a war-torn city. The Orontes River runs low now, sluggish and green, carrying fragments of wreckage from months of siege, shattered beams, broken shields, the ghosts of the dead. But for the first time in a year, the sound of hammers rises from the ruins instead of war cries. The city is rebuilding, or trying to. Bohemond has made his victory permanent. He calls himself Princeps Antiochianus, Prince of Antioch, and his red banner with the black cross flutters from the citadel. His men patrol the walls where Turkish archers once stood. His scribes issue decrees in Latin and Greek. Markets reopen under his protection, though most are little more than rubble with tents. Yet beneath the surface the city is still divided. The Franks who fought the siege have taken houses by force, turning Muslim mansions into noble halls. Armenian and Greek families live in fear, their sons pressed into labour, their daughters married off for alliances. Latin priests replace Greek ones in the churches. The call to prayer has fallen silent. Antioch, once a crossroads of faiths, has become a fortress of one. Bohemond moves through it like a man walking through his own myth. He attends Mass each morning, distributes bread to the poor when he can find it, and inspects the rebuilt defences. Yet behind his calm exterior he knows how fragile his new kingdom is. The Muslim world will not forgive the loss of Antioch. Ridwan of Aleppo still plots vengeance. Kerbogha burns for revenge. Even Byzantium, ostensibly Christian, waits to reclaim what it considers its own. He's surrounded by enemies and allies alike who'd prefer him dead. Meanwhile, to the south, Raymond of Toulouse has begun his march toward Jerusalem, taking with him many of the pilgrims who still cling to the Crusades' original vow. His departure leaves Bohemond with fewer soldiers, but also fewer rivals. Antioch is now his, uncontested, but it's a hollow victory. Within the city, the Holy Lance, the relic that saved them, continues to cause turmoil. Peter Bartholomew, the man who claimed to have discovered it, is now hailed by the common soldiers as a prophet. His followers claim he performs miracles, others call him a fraud. Accusations swirl like smoke. Bohemond and the nobles have grown tired of him. His visions, once useful, now threaten to undermine their authority. He speaks of new prophecies, warnings that God will punish the proud, that the princes have betrayed the crusade for gold. He becomes a dangerous voice in a city already cracking from within. Finally, the knights decide to silence him with a test. On April 8th, 1099, Peter Bartholomew agrees to undergo the ordeal by fire, to walk between two blazing pyres holding the Holy Lance, proving by divine protection that his visions are true. The entire city gathers in the square to watch. They build two walls of flame, 12 paces long. The heat is so intense that even the spectators can feel their skin prickle. Peter crosses himself, clutching the lance. "God knows my truth," he says softly. Then he steps forward. For a moment the fire parts around him, and the crowd gasps. But halfway through, his robe catches flame. He stumbles, screaming. The knights rush to drag him out, but his body is already a ruin. He dies in agony days later. The Holy Lance is carried away in silence. No one claims to see miracles again. The relic that once united them is now hidden, locked away in the cathedral. Bohemond takes it as a sign, not from heaven, but from history. Faith can raise armies, yes, but it cannot rule cities. Men do. Through the winter and into spring he strengthens his principality. He grants lands to loyal knights, rebuilds bridges, and opens trade with Armenian towns to the north. Slowly, Antioch begins to thrive again. Pilgrims arrive, merchants return, and for a time, the city feels almost alive. But peace in the east is a myth. In 1100, Bohemond leads an expedition eastward into the lands of the Danish men Turks, seeking to expand his borders and secure Antioch's future. He wins a few skirmishes, but his luck runs dry. Ambushed near Melitene, he's captured and dragged in chains to a fortress deep in Anatolia. For 2 long years, the Prince of Antioch languishes in a cell, while his nephew Tancred rules in his name. The man who conquered a city by cunning and faith now survives on scraps, dreaming of the walls he once commanded. When he's finally released in 1103, he returns not to a crusader's paradise but to a kingdom already slipping away. The Byzantines demand his submission. The Armenians resent his taxes. His own men are tired of endless wars. Bohemond, ever the survivor, sails back to Europe to gather support. He parades himself as a hero of the faith, the conqueror of Antioch, and raises a new army under the banner of a second crusade, this one against Byzantium itself. He returns to the east in 1107, not as a pilgrim, but as a warlord. His armies march through Epirus, laying siege to Dyrrhachium, but this time fortune abandons him completely. The Byzantines crush his army. Bohemond is forced to swear an oath of vassalage to Emperor Alexios Komnenos, the same man he once betrayed. He dies a few years later in southern Italy, far from the city that made his name. Antioch endures without him for another century, trading hands between Crusaders, Byzantines, and Muslims until, at last, it falls to Saladin's heirs in 1268. The walls still stand today, silent above the Orontes, half swallowed by grass and dust. Bohemon's name survives in the stones carved faintly into a crumbling gate, Princeps Antiochiae, the prince who turned faith into conquest, and conquest into legend. Centuries pass, but the name Antioch never really fades. Even after its towers crumble and its citadel lies empty, the story of its siege burns like an ember in every chronicle of the Crusades. A story told by monks in candlelit scriptoria, by knights in smoky halls, by priests who still struggle to decide whether it was miracle or madness. To the chroniclers of the First Crusade, Antioch is both triumph and warning. They write of divine light shining over the battlefield, of angels seen above the ramparts, of the holy lance blazing in the hands of starving men. But they also whisper, sometimes between the lines, of greed, betrayal, and the strange way faith twists into ambition when the sword is drawn. And at the centre of it, all stands Bohemond of Taranto, the prince who never stopped being a soldier. To some, he's the hero who saved Christendom. To others, the opportunist who turned a pilgrimage into an empire. Both are true. Even long after his death, bards in France and Italy sing of him. They call him Bohemond the Tall, the knight whose shadow fell across 2 continents. His image appears in tapestries, stern-faced, holding a sword in one hand and a cross in the other. A symbol of courage, yes, but also of the thin line between faith and pride. Meanwhile, in the east, the memory of Antioch takes a darker shape. To the Muslim chroniclers, like Ibn al-Athir and Imad ad-Din al-Isfahani, it becomes a story of treachery, a warning of what happens when division blinds a people to danger. They speak of Yagisian's fall, of Firuz's betrayal, of Kerbogha's doomed army crushed by zeal. To them, the Crusaders are not saints but invaders, strangers from the west who brought fire and ruin to the lands of Islam under the guise of salvation. Both versions are true in their own way. Antioch was never just a battle, it was a collision of worlds. After the city's fall, the Crusaders who survived carried its memory like a brand. Godfrey of Bouillon and Raymond of Toulouse would go on to reach Jerusalem in 1099, storm its walls, and slaughter its defenders in scenes that made even chroniclers tremble. The Holy City fell, but it was Antioch that had already shown the world what the Crusade truly meant, that once faith takes up a sword, it never lays it down easily. In Europe, the news of Antioch's miracle spreads like wildfire. Churches hold masses of thanksgiving. Priests preach that the hand of God has struck down the infidels. New pilgrims take the cross, believing they too will see miracles on the road to the Holy Land. But even among believers, doubt lingers. The letters that trickle back from the east speak not of glory, but of starvation, disease, and death. They tell of a siege so long and brutal that men ate rats and corpses, of the holy lance found beneath a ruined floor, and the prophet who burned alive to prove its truth, of a prince who crowned himself ruler of the East while his comrades marched on to Jerusalem. By the time these tales reach Paris, Rome and London, Antioch has become more myth than memory. The truth, buried beneath prayer and propaganda, lies as deep as the spear that started it all. Centuries later, travellers still visit the ruins. They find the old Roman walls rising out of the hills, the stone towers scarred by fire, the broken bridge that once spanned the Orontes. Shepherds graze their flocks where knights once fought. Children dig up rusted arrowheads and call them angels' teeth. In the wind that moves through the ruins, you can still hear echoes of that long winter, the clang of armour, the whisper of prayers, the cry of hunger. Antioch may be dead, but the memory breathes. For the Crusade didn't end here. It began here. This was where faith learned to endure hunger, where politics learned to wear a halo, and where Europe and the East first collided in blood and fire. And though the banners have long since fallen, the questions Antioch raised still hang in the air. How far will men go when they believe they are right? How much of heaven can survive when it's bought with war? Antioch never answered. It simply endured. One stone, one prayer, one ghost at a time. When you stand there now high on Mount Silpius, you can see the same river curling through the valley, the same mountains that once hid Kerbogha's tents, the same sky that watched saints and sinners alike. The wind is dry, the grass brittle, but if you close your eyes you can almost hear it, the murmur of 1,000 weary soldiers whispering Deus Vult. And somewhere in the dust below, beneath the layers of broken marble and forgotten bones, the rusted point of a spear may still lie buried, waiting for another hand, another age to believe again. Even long after its fall, Antioch lingers like a fever in the European imagination. It's whispered in cloisters, sung in halls, and etched into the memory of every knight who dreams of the Holy Land. Pilgrims cross themselves at the name. Poets invoke it in rhymes of valour and despair. No other siege, no other victory so perfectly captures the madness of faith turned to fire. For the men who lived through it, though, it never ended. Those who marched on to Jerusalem carried its ghosts with them. The taste of starvation, the stink of decay, the memory of friends devoured by hunger, it clung to them like ash. They had seen what holy war truly meant, and yet they couldn't stop. When they reached Jerusalem in 1099 and stormed its walls, the slaughter that followed made Antioch look almost merciful. Chroniclers wrote that blood in the streets reached to the knees of horses. They called it divine vengeance. They called it purification. But deep down, the men who fought there knew the pattern had already been set outside Antioch's gates. Faith feeding on fear, righteousness hardening into necessity. Bohemond never reached Jerusalem. He stayed behind, building his principality out of broken promises, yet in a way he reached farther than any of them. Antioch became the template for all that followed, the first Crusader state, the first mingling of church and conquest, sword and sermon. His fortress stood as proof that religion could rule by steel. The princes of Antioch who came after him, Tancred, Bohemond II and others, kept the illusion alive. They built cathedrals beside mosques, minted coins with crosses, and sent letters to Rome boasting of conversions and victories. But the city was never truly theirs. It was too Eastern to be European, too Christian to be Muslim, too haunted to belong to anyone. Trade returned, of course. Armenians, Greeks, Syrians and Latins mingled again in its markets. Pilgrims passed through on their way south, still believing they walked through sacred soil. The city's towers gleamed white under the Syrian sun. On the surface, Antioch seemed reborn, but beneath that fragile peace, old wounds festered. Every faction mistrusted the others. The Latins saw the Greeks as heretics. The Armenians feared both. Merchants dealt in relics as easily as in spices. Faith had become another currency. The Crusader nobles fought one another almost as often as they fought their enemies. And still, the wars came. In 1144, Edessa fell to the Muslims, sparking the Second Crusade. Antioch became the rallying cry again, the miracle city, the symbol of what could be won and lost. Kings and popes invoked it to stir men's hearts. Knights set sail from France and England, dreaming of another Antioch, another divine victory. None of them truly understood the cost. By the 13th century, Antioch was a faded prize, its glory long spent. The Mamluks under Baybars finally stormed it in 1268, ending the Crusader presence once and for all. The chronicles say the slaughter lasted 3 days, that not one stone was left unbloodied. The city that had outlasted empires died as it had lived, in fire, but the idea of Antioch refused to die. In Europe, it became legend, the citadel of faith, the miracle of endurance, the place where God himself once intervened. In the Muslim world, it became a tale of betrayal and resilience, a lesson in vigilance against division. Centuries later, when travellers from Venice and Genoa wandered its ruins, they still found fragments of the old city, carved crosses half buried in sand, Latin inscriptions eroded by wind, bits of armour fused into the earth. The Orontes still flowed past, quiet and indifferent, the same river that had seen all of it. And as they stood on Mount Silpius looking down on the valley, they said it felt like standing over a tomb, one so vast that even time couldn't cover it. Antioch became less a place and more an idea. The chronicles turned it into scripture, the poets turned it into warning. They wrote of men who had walked beside angels and demons, who had eaten one another to stay alive, who had believed so fiercely that heaven itself seemed to bend under the weight of their conviction. It was, in every sense, the perfect parable for the age that birthed it. Faith had conquered a city, and then the city had conquered faith. Today, when historians trace the roots of the Crusades, they stop at Antioch. It's where everything came together, the zeal, the ambition, the politics, the miracle. It's where medieval Europe discovered both its power and its darkness. You can still walk those ruins today. The stones are warm in the afternoon sun, the wind dry and steady. Lizards dart across the old Roman walls. Somewhere beneath your feet, the bones of both conquerors and conquered lie tangled together, indistinguishable now. You listen, and the silence feels heavy, like a prayer too long unanswered. For centuries armies have come and gone, gods have risen and fallen, but the wind still moves through the empty towers, whispering in Latin, in Arabic, in Greek. Antioch, Antioch. It doesn't speak of glory anymore, only memory. Night falls over the ruins of Antioch. The modern city, Antakya now, glows faintly in the distance, its streetlights threading through the valley where the Orontes still winds like an old scar. But here, amid the crumbled towers and grass-grown walls, time feels slower. The stones breathe in silence. The ghosts of centuries stir with the wind. You walk along what was once the northern wall, the same wall Firouz climbed, the same gate Bohemond opened on that night in 1098. The air is cool, tasting faintly of dust and river water. Somewhere below a dog barks, a motorbike hums along the road, and for a moment the past and present blur. Imagine it as it was. The firelight flickering off mail and helmets, the thunder of hooves on the plain, the cries of Deus Vult rising over the sound of drums. Imagine the smell, the smoke, the sweat, the fear, and the faces gaunt with hunger yet alight with something greater than survival. You can almost see them still, kneeling before the Holy Lance, whispering prayers into the cold dawn. They believed heaven watched them. Maybe it did, or maybe it was only the reflection of their own will, the stubborn, burning conviction that what they did mattered, that suffering could sanctify, that death could be holy. Antioch was the crucible that proved how thin that line truly is. Faith carried them here, ambition kept them. Salvation demanded blood, and they gave it willingly. They built a kingdom in God's name and then crowned themselves kings, and yet the city still stands, not as Bohemond's Antioch, nor Yagician's, nor the Romans before them. It stands as memory made stone, a place that has survived every god, every conqueror, every banner. Its walls are cracked, its towers hollow, but its story endures. You pause by a broken archway. The moonlight pools through it, soft and silver, washing the stones that once ran red. A single olive tree grows in the courtyard where the Crusaders once prayed before battle. Its leaves shimmer, whispering in the wind like quiet applause for those long gone. If you listen closely, you can still hear them. Not the clamour of armies, just the murmur of the living who wanted to believe, soldiers whispering to their saints, mothers calling to sons, voices carried into the night and lost in time. The historians will argue forever about what happened here. Was it divine will or human greed? Was the Holy Lance real, or a trick born of desperation? Did Bohemond save Christendom, or simply carve his own path to glory? None of it changes what Antioch became, a mirror. Hold it up, and every generation sees itself reflected, its hunger, its certainty, its doubt. The wind grows colder now, brushing your skin like the breath of the past. The river murmurs below, steady as prayer. Somewhere under your feet lies that spearhead, the one Peter Bartholomew swore was holy, the one that turned defeat into legend. It's buried deep in the earth, just another piece of rust among countless bones. But maybe that's fitting. Miracles were never meant to last forever. You take a deep breath. The night smells of stone and wild time. Above, the stars flicker, the same stars that watched the siege, the same light that shone on hunger and faith and ruin, the same sky that saw it all and forgot nothing. And here, in this quiet place where empires once bled, you understand the final truth of Antioch, that every city falls, that faith endures, that history, like the Orontes, keeps flowing, slow, patient, eternal. So you sit among the ruins as the moon rises higher, and the last echoes of the Crusade fade into the hum of crickets and wind. And when you finally close your eyes, the silence feels almost merciful. The night has gone soft over the Orontes. The ruins of Antioch gleam pale under the moon, their edges blurred by mist. The wind moves slow through the grass where walls once rose, sighing against the stones like a memory too tired to fade. You walk along the ridge in silence. The earth is cool, the air scented faintly with dust and olives. Below, the river glimmers, carrying the reflections of streetlights from modern Antakya, tiny, trembling reminders that life never truly leaves a place, it only changes shape. The world that burned here is long gone. No banners, no swords, no prayers shouted into the night. Yet something lingers, a hush that feels like respect or maybe forgiveness. The ghosts of knights and merchants, of priests and prisoners, all share the same quiet now. Whatever names they carried, whatever gods they called, time has folded them gently into one story. You pause by a fallen tower. The stones are warm from the day's sun, rough under your hand. The breeze shifts, and for an instant it sounds like chanting. Latin, Arabic, Greek, all woven into one soft echo. The song of humanity trying, always, to make meaning from the impossible. Above, the stars shimmer like coins scattered across black water. They've seen every siege, every faith, every fall. They'll see ours too one day. But for now, they simply shine. You breathe, slow and even. The air is calm, the night forgiving. The weight of centuries presses lightly, like a hand on your shoulder. It's enough to remember that all things, cities, empires, beliefs, fade, but the stories remain. And tonight, under the silver sky of Syria, the story of Antioch finally rests. Good night, traveller. May your dreams remember gently.